A poll conducted by ICM for The Guardian has the Conservatives' lead down to 12 points. You heard Duncan there mentioning the poll of polls, giving her a lead now that is inside of the single digits. Let's get the reaction of Mike Finn. He's a researcher in British politics at the University of Warwick. Thank you for joining us here on France 24.
My pleasure.
Which way is the wind blowing?
Well, as you say from the polls, there seems to be a certain amount of momentum behind Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party, but in truth, it owes at least as much as your correspondent implied to the difficulties that Theresa May's facing. She sold herself in this election as the voice of, in her words, strong and stable leadership. And thus far, her campaign has been dogged by one disaster after another. So, at least as much as anything else, it's really about the wheels coming off the Conservative campaign as it is about the rejuvenation of the Labour Party at the moment.
Explain that to us. Why are the wheels coming off?
Well, I think, to be honest, just to offer a judgment call, I think to a certain extent because of a degree of complacency. You know, the Conservative manifesto was released. It had very little detail in terms of costings, in terms of how they would pay for their policies. There was an issue in the Conservative manifesto, which your viewers may be aware of, in that there was a new policy which has proven to be very controversial about the paying for care for the elderly, and the idea that people might actually have to give up their houses to pay for their social care, wouldn't be able to pass the houses on to their children. That's hugely volatile over here because, of course, many Conservative voters are elderly. Many Conservative voters do wish to pass on their house to their children. And that's been massively controversial, has become known as the dementia tax. That's the kind of spectacular own goal we didn't expect from Theresa May. And since that point, really, she has been fighting a defensive rearguard action. And increasingly, Mr. Corbyn's media performances, culminating in the debate last night, have been more polished. And he has started to look more prime ministerial. And as that lead has narrowed in the polls, some polls have put at times only 5 or 6 points ahead of Mr. Corbyn. There seems to be an air of panic in the Conservative campaign. So, as I say, there have been policy issues, but also there may have just been a sense of complacency at the start of this campaign that Labour wasn't really a threat. And unfortunately for them, that seems to be coming home to roost.
On the campaign trail this Tuesday, Theresa May seems like she was trying to bring the conversation back to Brexit. I'm the one who can negotiate a good deal on Brexit. Is this general election at the outset, that's how we saw it. It was going to be all about Brexit. Is it the case?
I think it's moved. I think it's definitely moved. You know, pundits such as myself, likewise, we thought it would be the Brexit election. But I think there's some degree to which voters have experienced a bit of Brexit fatigue. Political anoraks like me, we're obsessed with Brexit. But it's been a year nearly now since the referendum, and people are worried about other issues. They're worried about things like social care. They're worried about things like security, obviously. They're worried about a whole range of issues that go beyond Brexit, however central Brexit is to them. If you look at, for example, what's happened to the Liberal Democrats, they placed their emphasis very strongly, very early on a second referendum. They believed they could capture a large amount of the Remain constituency from last year's referendum by doing so. But it's done nothing for them. It doesn't seem immediately obvious that people are prioritising their views on Brexit over, for example, their views on healthcare, for instance, or police officers on the street. So while she's trying to turn it back to Brexit today, as you rightly know, and that is her strongest card, it's what elicited the strongest support for her last night in the debate, it's difficult to see how she can constrain this down to Brexit now. Mr. Corbyn has been successful in widening the spectrum of this election, and that's an issue for Theresa May that she's finding difficult to control.
Just also, Mike, I have to ask this question. When we see, you know, like that report that says that there's a 12-point gap, of course, it's not a proportional representation. It's district by district, first past the post.
Absolutely.
What does the next parliament look like right now?
You had to ask that question, didn't you? I think, as you rightly know, with the nature of Britain's electoral system, it is very difficult to say because these poll leads only matter or can only predict the future if there's a uniform swing in line with that percentage. In other words, in layman's terms, if that poll lead is mirrored around the country. Of course, that's not going to be the case. And it's difficult to say. In some Labour Conservative marginals, Conservative Labour marginals, local factors will be at play. Corbyn will be more unpopular in certain places than others. Ditto Theresa May. But what I think you can take from the polling at the moment is the Labour base is more energised than it has been. So insofar as in marginals, Theresa May might have been expecting Labour voters, if they didn't vote Tory, to stay at home. I don't think that's the case. If I had to offer a bet now, and all these bets are provisional, of course, I would say that she is in a situation where if the polls continue to narrow, it may be that she comes back with a majority, but it could be an even smaller majority than the one she started with. And in that case, that really begs the question of why she called this election at all.
One final question for you, Mike. What shocked many in Europe was when there was the Brexit referendum campaign, how acrimonious it was. Britain is known for its moderation. How's this election campaign?
Oh, it's been acrimonious. I think it's been extremely acrimonious. I think that we're in a new world in terms of the, if you like, lack of politeness in politics in Britain now. The stiff upper lip is gone. We're in an age of social media. We're in an age where alternative media increasingly tries to structure the nature of political debate. And that has been volatile. Immediately after the Manchester attack, as you know, following the pause in the campaigning, Mr. Corbyn made some comments about the nature of British foreign policy. And Theresa May and her team responded very virulently to those. I don't think we're going to see a return, if you like, to the stiff upper lip of British elections in the 1960s through to the 1990s. I think that era is over. We're in a much more volatile world now.
Mike Finn of Warwick University, many thanks for joining us.
Thank you.